Welcome to another weekend here on the platform. It is our tradition to examine developments in the polity, and today will be no different. My name is Sam Omasheye.
It was a sort of tempest in a dark place. Bellwether Minister was angry, and he went out of his mode of quiet cunning and came down on his target with the unsubtle severity of a cat. Babatunde Raji Fashola, SAN, would not let a certain Sunday Oduton get away with it. Fashola's source of fury was a spokesman of a body the minister would not deal with because it had no place in law. It was the Association of Electricity Distribution of Nigeria. This was over a month ago, and it was a measure of the friction between the minister and the discos who distribute power to all of us in offices and homes. With his hair famously waving farewell to his dark sheen, he now looks more hoary than his age. It is a marker of his jobs as three-in-one minister, but power is the most demanding and the most public of his worries. Just as his job is a trinity, so is the power sector. Yet of the generation, transmission and distribution, the area with the most challenge has been distribution. Ordinarily, we would expect it to be generation, but we generate more than we enjoy. So power is both tangible and intangible. That is one of the drawbacks and most suffocating of the challenges. The problems go back to the Jonathan era, when the investors of the power sector, especially the discos, rushed into investment. They did it with enthusiasm. They took loans, they set up companies, they joyed over a gold mine. With about 11 trillion naira in debt, they now see theirs is more of a landmine. Some of them have lost arm and legs. They have threatened to part with the investment. With arms and legs gone, how do you run even if you should? One of the fundamental problems is that power is expensive, and discos have seen that their ends cannot meet. Government agencies are owing a whole lot, while the discos are owing NBET, or National Bulk Electricity Trading Company. They cannot win if fight is their option with the minister. The minister also knows that fight is malaise when what is at stake is a big, lumbering fight against the prevalence of darkness. That means more unemployment, more frustration among youth and families, more militancy, more failure of states. Every day, every hour, debts mount. Payments cannot catch up with the payload. They put that debt profile at 800 billion naira. But the minister says they are playing clever with the math, yet the sum is staggering. Yet, the more difficult part has been the question that has worried both minister and discos, and that is, how do we pay for power? Do the tariffs reflect the investment? The discos and some analysts say for every 80 naira invested, the consumer pays about 30 naira. The shortfall is a burden on discos. This has been addressed by the proposals in the Minister's Power Sector Recovery Program, or PSRP, that the Federal Executive Council has approved but needs to implement with greater vigor. This sets out ways to help the power sector with meters and also with cushioning debt burdens of the discos and pare the insolvency of the sector. But the Buhari administration has to do more and help the minister at the level of the Federal Executive Council to implement the PSRP. The World Bank, IFC, and even the African Development Bank have promised to furnish the sector with close to $5 billion. They are waiting. Also at bottom is the chicken and egg conundrum. Are we ready to pay for power in Nigeria? Power is not cheap. Our people avidly buy so much data a day on frivolous calls on our cell phones. It costs us much to pay for power. It is also said that if the federal government puts the required funding in place and power is supplied regularly, will the poor pay? It is an uncharted territory. But the federal government and National Assembly have to help the minister. The discos have not helped matters when they cherry-pick who to supply power, leading to eruptions of protest of late. What is needed now is a robust dialogue that allows the bellwether minister enough leeway to make the foreign funding come in. The bellwether minister must be smacking his lips these days. He must also be beside himself with fury. These antipodal emotions are not altogether out of place if you consider the fortunes of the power sector since he mounted the saddle of darkness. First, he met the power situation in a whirligig. Discos were dancing into a tailspin with complaints. Consumers wanted many things and seemed to get nothing. They wanted meters and they had excuses. They cried out against excuses and they had more excuses. Yet, the minister has recorded success. Power sparked from a measly 3,000 megawatts to an unprecedented 7,000. It was not always there, but it was mostly in that neighborhood. This good news meant more supply. The NBET is owed too much. The discos are owing too much, just like the federal agencies. It shows that quite a lot of money is needed. The discos have made their mistake. History of mistakes should be a source of rumination, not ruination. The minister's heart is in the right place, but he needs a president that must take the matter as such. If we have a federal government that says power is the only thing it wants to do, it will solve education, infrastructure, jobs at all with one fell blow. No government till date has showed more enthusiasm and methodical approach to power as the Buhari administration. Yet, a lot has to happen and it involves creating a meeting of minds.
Welcome to Big Talk. It is my pleasure to introduce to you one of the greatest personalities in Nigerian history, and she's no other than Professor Grace Alele Williams. Grace Alele Williams is the first female to obtain a PhD in Nigeria, not to say that she also obtained it in one of the rarest of subjects, which is mathematics. She is also the first woman to head a Nigerian university as Vice Chancellor at the University of Benin. It's my pleasure to welcome you to my show, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Many of our set went to higher college to do chemistry, to become pharmacists.
Higher college, this is now the Yaba College of Technology.
And the first woman head of pharmacy in Benin area was my classmate.
Okay.
Another one head in Port Harcourt area was my classmate, but ahead of me in 1 year, but we took school certificate together. So you can see, I just felt I should not go in for another scholarship and go abroad. So I went to work in Queens, and I thought 1 year I would go to do what was known as the getting a teaching certificate, which we didn't have here. So we all went to the Institute of Education in London University, and I was supposed to do that. But first year, second year, third year, and I thought, in the civil service, you are promoted by the time you get to a particular year. So why am I waiting? So I was told, I found out from my lecturers and from my home mistress that I could apply to a place, colleges in America, and I would come in as a teacher, as a professor, in quotes, in a university, in a state university. I applied and got about 7 answers back, all said yes. So I resigned from the Western region.
Okay. You went to Vermont?
Yes, but I didn't just go. When I resigned, I didn't have enough money to go, but I was determined I was going to work, teach, and go to school at the same time. But it was the same year that we had our first head of service for Nigeria as a black man.
Okay.
And Western region was the first. So
who was that?
He became a representative in the United Nations. It's from Abeokuta. Okay. I'm very bad at remembering names, but I know him very well. I should have written some of these because I knew, but I'll remember the name before we get. He saw my name and he said, "Oh, Alele, Alele. Isn't there one Alele who plays cricket? Why is she resigning?" He wasn't satisfied with the reason, so I said, "Bring her to me." And of course, you could imagine what happened to me when they say you are going to see the head of service. Head of service. I was shaking in my sandals, shaking in my uniform, shaking in my best dress. Yeah. What had I done? He said, "You have resigned." "Why have you resigned, young lady?" "Sit down." And I sat down and he said, "Why have you resigned?" I said, "I've been here for 4 years. People are going ahead, they've gone to London to do the Institute of Education diploma, and I don't have the diploma, and I'm not, I am just a teacher, a grade 2 teacher, more or less. And when I come back, I'll be behind 4 sets of people who are ahead of me in service. That's why I'm resigning, sir." He said, "I see, I see. Well, I have to go to a meeting, so you'll go to my house. My wife will be waiting there for you and she'll give you some tea. And when I come home, we'll discuss it some more." So he turned to the man in charge of education, an Englishman, and said, "We're going to change this, cancel the application, ask her to, we will not accept it, but she's now going. She's done 3 years. Why have you not sent her?" He said, "Because we have no other person to teach mathematics. And she has been teaching mathematics 6 years. Girls are coming, the girls are now doing applied mathematics and so on and so on." "Oh, they are, I see, I see. I didn't know the I see meant for my good." So it was changed completely. So he came home and he lectured me a bit on not taking too many steps at the same time. Lovely woman. You know, our first representative in the United Nations. I can see him sitting here, but I can't remember his name, but I will remember. After all, I'm 85 plus. So so I'm allowed to forget things every now and again. So I went to his house. His wife talked to me. His wife said, "I wanted my daughter to be in Queens, but they wouldn't accept." So I said, "Please, all I'm told is to mark the papers," and I had to mark all the papers. You know, in those days we had mathematics, English, and general knowledge. I marked 2 sets of papers, and that was all I knew. But I'm sure it was a fair decision. But we did have Nigerian teachers too. We had a Nigerian teacher, Ukoyi, who was very good. But our best teacher was an English girl who died in a crash from London here. One of those crashes, I think it happened in 1952, because they went home every 2 years. So that was how I left being a resignee from Queen's School, Ede, to be sent abroad. I chose Vermont because I looked at the map of America and I remembered from my geography where the states were. At least Vermont in New England was closer to Nigeria than the other places that were in the western part of the US. And so I said, if I went to Vermont, if anything happened, my mother is not very young, I can quickly. So I went to Vermont with one. You know, in the American embassy, you have the British, the American embassy giving you one visa to go and to come back. And when you come back, you have to ask for another visa. And I didn't want to come back. I knew I wouldn't come back in 2 years. But in 2 years, I did everything I was supposed to do. But luckily, by the end of my first quarter, end of my first semester. At Vermont, all my teachers decided I had to do a PhD with mathematics and philosophy. I didn't want to do philosophy because I thought of people who did philosophy as very brilliant people and so on and so forth.
I didn't think you were brilliant.
No, I didn't think I was brilliant. I didn't think I was brilliant. I confess to that.
It was brave of you to decide to go as a woman at that period of our history.
Well, I'd always been a little brave, but quite cowardly in many respects. Quite cowardly in many respects. I got to Vermont and I was given very good friendship I made with the girls in my class, the girls not in my class, all of us in the same dormitory. The first year, I was given a separate room, so there was good reason for me to go.
So you chose to go to Chicago for your PhD?
Yes, that was because Harvard would expect me to do work in Germany. I couldn't. I had enough to do with French.
So
I passed the French exam, and that was the only thing I needed. Mathematics, I was way on top already, so I had fulfilled that. But to go and study German. That was a bit too much, because you see, I was teaching. I was teaching to make sure I could get extra money. I didn't need the extra money, and I saved quite a bit of it, but hoping that if I really got into a university to do a PhD, I did not expect to have free more scholarships, because I didn't see myself as an American scholar. But the good news was I did have a scholarship, as it was, but it wasn't called a scholarship, it was called a fellowship. And that bugged me through 2 years. And after the 2 years, it was just hard work. And it was interesting hard work, because I could always get a teaching job as a university teacher in a smaller university.
Now, you finished your PhD and all of that, and then eventually you came to Nigeria.
Not eventually, very quickly.
Why so?
I finished the PhD, yes. I passed the examinations, yes, all in February and March, and I continued working, but I had a few schools that wanted to see me to talk about my country. And that gave me some more time to really learn about America. And when we finished that, I got to, because at this time, mathematics was having a new look. One thing that I haven't mentioned, which was very important, was that a few months after I got to America, the African Americans had made up their minds that they had won the case at the Supreme Court level and disabled the case that the whites had brought against them, that you should be in America, you are equal to an Americans, but you have separate.
Yes.
So we are equal
but separate.
Yes, equal but separate. And they were going to break that down. So my first few days in America, I read about these women, you know, making sure that the children, the primary school level, children at the secondary school level, who had been well groomed to meet and to change this practice that the Supreme Court had. That was the only way to do it. No governor was brave enough to do it. They did it. And the people went to school, and they were guided by, you know, the police. Not the police as we would have them here, but you have state police over there. But then the federal government has the police, and they guided these children. And can you imagine what it felt like? You've been teaching primary school, secondary school, all over the states, and you see these people in the states, white women shouting against, we cannot have them in our schools, we cannot have them in our schools. It turned the love I had for America upside down.
It was the age of Jim Crow.
Yes, it was the age of Jim Crow. It was a gem of, oh yes, we are equal but separate. And so that was a changing point in my life. But in Vermont, and you saw recently the last thing they had, you know, the person who almost threw Mrs. Clinton out of power. He was from Vermont. They're the type of people, a small state, very small state, but people who think they are farmers, they have their the
rural sensibility.
Yes, but at the same time, but by the time you meet a few people in the churches and in secular meetings, you meet their parents, you know that they are tough people. So the encouragement of me was something that I held very dearly. And so I went to Vermont, saw these people, listened to them as they talked. That was good. My education didn't, because I was being sent to come back to be a teacher. And my mathematics people, because this was my teaching subject, they put together a separate plan for me to work at and to end up with all that they had requirements for, but at the same time, all that I should do to ensure that when I get back to my country, I would know that I have dealt well. But at the same time, they wanted me to do a PhD. So with all such people, meeting them, and most of my classes in education were met with in the evening classes, where superintendents of schools were attending the same courses with me. It brought me to a rather high level. And I was looking forward to finishing in Chicago.
So Chicago was a good experience.
Very good experience. I mean, you talked to, you didn't meet the vice chancellor. Well, you don't call them vice chancellors there. You don't meet the president. You don't meet them every day like that, just as you don't meet our vice chancellors every day like that. But the teachers you met are people who are there not because they had a PhD, but because they have so much experience in teaching and so much research done, that if you sit down and wonder at them and study from them, you have to go just move up high. And that was good. That was very good.
So when you returned to Nigeria, what did you do? I'm sure the factor of your mother was a very preeminent one in bringing you back home.
It was, but at the same time, I also had this feeling that my last few months, where I had been working with people who were doing research in the development of America, there were two things. I just mentioned the factor of us wanting to break that, and which they did with Martin Luther King. Of course, they killed him a few years after. But the second one was Russia got into outer space.
Yes, Sputnik.
And America did not get to outer space. So they said all the mathematics we were teaching, all the physics we were teaching, everything was rubbish. So what are you doing? And with all the people who were in these various groups, my school was quite, government gave them money, improve the syllabus, improve the teaching. And I really welcomed that, because it did me a lot of good. I was part of this. So when I was ready to go, I was invited into a group that had been in Africa, that had met science and mathematics heads of schools and so forth, and ministries, and they had set up a meeting once a year in which they were going to read and encourage the syllabus to be changed in mathematics in Nigeria, in British-speaking countries, and I was part of it. So when I came back, I saw my mother for a few days, 1 week.
Where was your mother?
Oh, she came to Lagos.
Lagos, okay.
And after that, I went straight to, not Tanzania, I went straight to
Kenya.
I told you. No, the next state, the one below it.
Tanzania?
No, next below it. I came to have my holidays and work later on, but this time I didn't go to Kenya. But we spent a few days in Kenya, just enjoying ourselves in the various places you have to go to see animals. But here we studied with African mathematicians, but mainly mathematicians, well-equipped mathematicians who were teaching and introducing more things into the universities, but at the same time, we were having people who had written books, who had researched into how do you teach mathematics from the very beginning. And to be there was something I could count on. I worked with them. There was one university teacher from Nigeria who had been my mate. But very soon, we also had a situation in which I needed a job. I went back to my ministry, offered to teach, and I was told, yes, you can come and teach, but you're not going to Queen's College, you'll go to College of Education. And it was in Ibadan. Okay. And I went there, and I was told your salary would still be the same.
In spite of your PhD?
Well, we will discuss that later. And I listened to them. So at the end of the month, I gave them my salary. I resigned, and I had already written my CV. And the head of the mathematics department just came into Ibadan as I was leaving. We didn't meet again, but there she was. And she said, but you are at the conference, weren't you? I said, yes, yes. And what did you do at the conference? And I repeated, teacher training education. I worked into that. If you are going to change mathematics, you have to change the curriculum first, and you have to do this, that, and the other. And she sort of looked at me and said, sharp, sharp woman. But it was a very good meeting with Professor Dike.
Dike, okay.
Yes, he was the VC
Professor
there.
Dike, obvious understand, is also a pioneer
Yes.
historian in
Yes.
Nigeria.
And
yes.
he said, but you didn't do history. And I told him the same story as I told you now. He said, I know you would prefer mathematics to this. So what are we going to do now? You are going to do education anyway. We need our teachers to be changed around. What about mathematics? I said, yes, sir, I want to start changing the curriculum of mathematics in the country. So if you mind, I have a research program here. So he gave me 2 positions, postdoctoral research fellow in mathematics, postdoc in mathematics department, and postdoctoral research fellow in education. And I was in the 2 departments, but I didn't really teach mathematics in the university because I was going to do something about this, which I started immediately. Luckily for me, I started that immediately. I got the job. I started some six schools where I started with primary 1 and the teachers in primary 1. And they were to do this and to do that with me. I was also preparing to get married. Okay. So I managed to put all of this together. I got married. I started on the program in Ibadan. I started on the program in Lagos because I knew it would be of advantage to me. Just 6 schools in Lagos. I got married. My mother was there. Okay. Everything went on nicely.
So when you
and 2 years later,
your husband, did you meet your husband in the US? Or?
I met him in the US in 1959. Okay. He was had just finished his PhD. Okay. He was very full of himself, just as I was very full of myself. That I had reached this level. But he wanted to go home, and I said goodbye. Then he said, oh, no, I don't mean that. I mean, we should go home together. And me, go home together after this. No, nothing doing. So he was very good. From 1959, he waited, came to Lagos, worked in Ibadan for some time. Wasn't too happy there, but he stayed on until I came back.
What did he study?
Political science.
Political science.
So in 1963, I finally married him, and we settled down.
You were involved in a lot of educational policies and all of that. Now, what did you think were the challenges as things evolved, especially during the time of Nigerian crisis in the 60s, and new universities were being created in different parts of the world, of the country, and education was expanding?
Yes. Actually, the education in Nigeria was quite good. We had a lot of men who had ideas as to what we could do with Nigeria, and the universities, right from the beginning, had become part of it. And one of the first things they wanted to do to make sure that we grew together was to set up an institute of education that would ensure that the various 5 universities, it was then later on there was a 6th one, which I went to later on, each had an institute of education. Started off with 3 only to start with. And what we had to do with all of this was to meet regularly, once every 3 months, to ensure that the policies we had in education had to be the same for everybody, that we all made it up, from the north, from the east, and from the west, or rather this way. But in doing this, we had to have each of these 3 areas, north, west, and east, had to have several small committees. These small committees met to examine what was going on in primary education, secondary education, adult education, teacher training education. How to improve on this so that the same examinations would be taken all over the country. And if we needed teachers anywhere, they had to have the same level. I can say this with pure heart because right from the beginning, my bosses always sent me to attend meetings. At the Institute of Education in Ibadan, I taught in the faculty, all right, but in the Institute of Education, the head of the institute would always say, "Oh, excuse me, Dr. Alele, there's a meeting going on here, you have to go." "Yes, sir." And I went and attended all these meetings, so I could understand the fact that the persons who set up these meetings with the head as the Federal Minister of Education. We had the Federal Minister of Education, the other ministers of education from the 4 states at the time, the 4 regions at the time, and the heads of departments that they could choose from this. We could have those meeting at the federal level after they would be bringing their decisions from the regional level to this. So if you had your decisions made at the regional level and you kept your statistics correct and complete, then we would be speaking the same language. But when you started changing, just to boost yourself up, the statistics as to who is going to school and who is not going to school, then things start getting spoiled. But even before then, if we agree on the policies, one of the basic policies that I saw, and I used to go around every few months to gather in policies made in education when I had not been there myself, because after the years I did grow up. From Ibadan, I came to Lagos. You could always tell what policies do we have. Most important at the beginning level is teachers training. What do we have for the teachers training? So we had this for the teachers training, and we went with them so far. And then unfortunately, the war came in. But even when the war came in, and after the war came in, we did try to ensure that the policies we had in education were policies that pushed us into the future. Let's look at it. Teacher training education, the same teacher training examination for all the teachers for primary level, and the same rules and regulations. It's not easy to keep. Yes, same standard, because the teachers came from all over. They said they said the examinations from all over. Now, when we saw that this was not going on too well, we introduced an institute of education where, at various levels, where the teachers, the policies were not being kept well, the standards of examinations was not going well, we introduced a situation where teachers could go to school at part-time education in their states, because the states went from 3 to 4, from 4 to 12, from 12 to 19, and from 19 to 37. Yes. And by the time it was this, people just had to fill them up. And when you have these things which are driven by politics and not by the resolutions that we have to keep to, they become wobbly and they don't have the same effect. We also had meetings in which the NUC, once every 2 years, had us all in teacher education, and what we were doing in policy and what we were doing in whatever the schools were dealing with, all brought to this level. But as usual, as we got bigger, as I said, from 3 members to 4 members, from 4 members to 12 members, from 12 members to 19 members, from 19 to 36. It's very difficult to make them understand that when you're in this committee, it is not that you must be for your area. It is not that you must be for your state.
We must integrate it to a national policy.
To a national grid, and we must not only put it that way, we must remember that the better it is in that solidified state, and the more we keep to it, the better. But we change so many things, and we change so many things. And I don't think I know sufficiently about education today, but one error was made quite early. It was the error that this committee that met had to take in a few other people. So it was not just education, we had to take from this, we had to take from this. The attention we could have given to those schools from us, we could go and buy knowledge and buy information from them later on, but just keep it to the education, and we get there. We asked to do quite a few things. We were asked to do quite a few things, and there were many in trying to do it, because there were now 37 people doing this. And it is not easy, given the level and standard of education in some of our states, especially when we wanted to introduce free education.
Now let's move to when you became Vice Chancellor. How was it? They must have resisted you becoming a Vice Chancellor. Why would a woman become the head of a Nigerian university? It has never happened before.
The trouble started in a way that it was not, I could not understand what they were saying, because there really was no trouble until my PRO said to me, but don't forget, there were 3 people who wanted this position. Okay. You've got it. You've got to, go out and be nice to them and so on. I said, but I'm nice to them. In fact, I've gone to each of their houses.
What did they mean by nice?
Well, what he meant, I think, was to call them as if they were special and not just deans. I should go beyond the being deanship, and I should call them, they should be what I'm talking about, what I'm thinking about, and so forth. Well, I think I did just once, and that was all. And I made it clear to them that I didn't ask for this job. If you are trying to get into bad association with all of this, well, I can go back to my job. But I didn't want to say that either. But I just had to think out what to say without bothering anybody too much. I knew some of them before. Two had been at the University of Benin, and they were there. I think about 40 of them started off trying to become vice chancellors. It wandered down to 4 or 3.
Okay.
So, but later on, I found out that it was not only their anger at me being a vice chancellor. The anger was also the result of I should behave like a woman. I should have 1 or 2 people that were my choice examples. I should be talking to them. They should give me advice which I should follow. And
in other words, you should subject yourself to them.
They didn't say so.
But that was the implication.
That was the implication. We know how this place is run. You have just come from Lagos, and we hear you are only a lecturer grade 2. Some said so. Well, I'd been a professor for over 10 years. Yes. Somebody said, but I never heard of you. So my reply, as usual, was not very sweet, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I've been a professor for 10 years. Should I go and examine, multiply it to you? After all, if my husband was not at home when the announcement was made, I'll tell him when he comes back, but not that I'm going to run around, going to look for him to say, I'm not a professor. The thing was on for a week. I'm not good at, some people are very good at making friends very easily, and everything is, I'm not diplomatic. That is the real point. My brother
used to call you the Iron Lady in those days.
Yes, I'm not diplomatic, and that must have brought quite a lot of problems. Yes. But there are so many things that were wanted. Let me give you an example which would make any vice chancellor not be willing to say yes immediately. The salaries were low. Yeah. Whether you like it or not, the salaries were low. The salaries are much now, and they are very happy about it, and I'm happy about it, but they haven't been paid. I think they've been paid now. However, when the salaries are so low, especially medical students, they need thorough teaching. But they are all, the top people are all going to Saudi Arabia. Who is going to build up? Luckily, 1 or 2 of them, although they went to Saudi Arabia, still kept on with their research. So with those I could pull up. But you're going to Saudi Arabia, how long will you be there? Well, 2, 3 years. But you've just come back from 1 year there. Who is going to teach these people? Well, we make allowances for them. So try. Shall we tell pro-chancellor? And I had no pro-chancellor for 1 year. So whichever, you go to the Ministry of Education, go to the NUC, these are some of the problems. Well, he cannot take it to the man upstairs to say, we need this, that, and the other. So finally, when the problems were getting very many, I was in the papers every day. This one was against me, that one was against me. I had not done this, I had not done... It's true, I had not done many things they wanted me to do. But if I did not learn sufficiently to answer their questions, I couldn't learn. So we had a meeting of NUC. It was at the meeting of NUC that I was told that the Minister of Education had decided that there would be a visitation to my university. Yes. Because at that time we'd had so much. Yeah. Now,
let our audience understand what the visitation meant.
Yes. Nobody really understood what a visitation meant. Yes. A visitation meant the head of state was going to set a judge plus 5 other people who understood law and whether you were doing your work well, given what your book, which made you a vice chancellor, what he meant. If you weren't doing well and they could bring out the mistakes you had made, they cut off your head and you've lost your job. Yeah. However, the thing was for 10 years, and it started from 1975 until 1985 December. October. I only went there 1985 October to 1985 December. But all the sins before me, from 1975 October to 1985, were all put on my head. No, I can't be responsible for that. So what I did And they did not understand, one. Two, what I did, they did not understand that I had gone through University of Lagos 4 visitation meetings.
Wow.
I did not belong, but I had been there. So what should I do? Simple. Sit down, go through all the departments in terms of what they are teaching, in terms of how we want them to be, in terms of the lacking, whether it was lacking in physical affairs or lacking in the new way we should teach, and what results we were getting, and what we had to do, buildings especially. It was very easy to do that because my staff would do most of it. I would have to go physically to look at it. But just before the people came, or around when they came, the staff brought me a letter to show 17 areas that the staff had worked to say I was not a good representative. 17
areas of complaints.
17 areas of complaints. I wasn't too happy with it, but I spent some time sitting down and reading these 17 things, just about 3 or 4 pages. The 17th one was the one which said, it didn't say only that I was incompetent, but it said I had no integrity. Well, I couldn't answer that. I didn't think I could answer that. And so I thought very seriously as to how I would answer that question. The others, for a couple of days, I sat with my staff. I had photocopies of it. They had been studying which parts belonged to them. We went to the faculties. They had to tell me what they'd done in their faculties from 1975 to 1985, December. But my part was only 85 December to 85 September to 85 December.
Yeah.
And everything else I thought I could do. And I sat to it because I did not want the shame. You see, I had come to a place where women were constantly hailing me. To be disgraced out of this position was not
in the matter. It was not on the cards.
No, it was not. And I had to
Stand
keep
up
it
for
up.
yourself.
Yes, and I stood up for myself. When I went through all of that, all I could do was, if I have no integrity, this is what it means. Look at what I've done in Benin. Have I brought anything new into education, learning? Yes. Have I brought anything into looking at standards at different pages? Had I done anything to improve curriculum in any matters? Had I done anything to do what was good for the women? I was in charge of the women in Lagos for quite a few years, 3 years or so, and later, before I came, another 3 years, and I put it all through. It was not easy to write, especially as I read Asu's reply. I smiled because I had a meeting point for 3 or 4 of them. Even for council, when council came to meet, if you give me a job to do, I do it well. But you cannot tell me how to do the job. No. When mistakes are made, you let me carry the responsibility.
Exactly.
Well, I think my stay for 20 years in Lagos helped me through that. Unfortunately, when I saw what was being written, I knew the Nigerian situation had been brought into it. And the Nigerian situation is that we are becoming tribalistic, which I hope you'll go on to next.
Yes.
It has become tribalistic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the fact that they're becoming tribalistic does not mean I should demote my university.
Yeah.
I will bring it up as much as I can, but some people may be needed to be taught lessons.
Yeah.
Not taught lessons which deprive them of their position as educated and well-instructed persons in their areas of teaching. But outside their areas of teaching in the university, if they behave wrongly, I will do what has to be done. And it didn't go down too well. But
in the end, you were...
Yes. When I brought the report back to Lagos, this time it wasn't me shaking in my shoes. It was other people shaking in their shoes. I remembered 1985, and I was in Senate. I was watching a few people. I was not shaking in my shoes. They were. But I had sent messages to say, look, don't carry on this thing to a far end. This is my part of Nigeria. You are not here to defend me, because I had had that defense my first year. Some people had come out to say, what have you done wrong? By the time I finished telling them what I had done right, they went back and said, we will support her. And that left me.
So the visitation was a visitation on the other people.
It was a visitation that showed that I was not as bad
as they painted.
Yes. For instance, if you say that there are fewer people who are promoted, then I will look at the council. I will look at promotions for every year, and as I'm a mathematician anyway, I can put them year by year, section by section. Whom have I employed, section by section? That is not true. You've told a lie. So answer it, not me. I've given them the answer. And everything else like that. Have I built up the university? Yes, I have. With only 11 million, I have built a faculty of law. I have built a faculty of medicine, medical sciences, and I was moving things inside. I had revoked 2 dining halls to large areas that could be used for teaching, and I had rearranged them so that they could be sciences. I had built a vice chancellor's which had not been built for many years. I had introduced faculties that were not there before. So what can you do to blame me? I had my experience of 20 years. If you don't know it, I won't be a lecturer too in 20 years. So, but it all went well, particularly for the women. I am happy to say, I had this book earlier. So many women, wives, who have become PhDs.
Yes.
And so many girls who have come into the university. So, believe me,
that's the story of Grace Alele Williams as a pioneer.
Not only that, I had quite a few of them moving up the ladder. We have a lot of deputies now in other universities. It is the fact that more women, you see them in the market, they say, my daughter will be like Alele.
Yes.
But usually, may I make one correction?
Yes.
Grace Awani Alele Williams. The name used to be Grace Awani Alele before I married Williams, but it was a bit too long. So now I'm taking back my longish name.
Okay. It's now Grace Awani
Alele Williams.
Good. I think on that note, we are ending this the first two-part series of interview on this show with a role model, an exponent of mathematics, and a woman for the ages. That is Grace Awani Alele Williams. Thank you very much for being on my show.
Yes, Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the program. You can catch up with my published columns and articles on my website, www.samomashai.com. Also follow me on Twitter. My handle is @SamOmashai. And enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, be good.